Hello everyone. So in this video we are going to discuss about the article 19 of the Indian Constitution that basically talks about the what? The right to freedom. Okay. So let us start with the article 19 of the Indian Constitution. So basically there are 6 clauses, and that is the article 19(1)(a) that has given 6 fundamental freedoms. Then the article 19 clause 2, 19 clause 3, 19 clause 4, 19 clause 5 and 19 clause 6. Okay, now article 19 clause 1, what? So it said that all citizens shall have the right. What? All citizens shall have the rights. That's mean it is given to citizen of India only. Okay, basically under article 19 clause 1 there are 6 subclauses, basically 6 fundamental freedoms. So let's see. So we will write these as article 19 clause 1, subclause A, subclause B, subclause C, subclause D, subclause E, subclause F, subclause G. Okay, so the article 19(1) subclause A talks about what? Talks about the freedom of speech and expression. That means the freedom to express idea and to express opinion, to communicate thought and to receive information. Okay, now the article 19 clause 1 subclause B that basically talks about what? The freedom of peaceful assembly. Now that basically means that it gives you right to gather and to hold meeting and to conduct processions, but the assembly must be peaceful and there should be no violence, no riot, and it should be without arms. Okay, now the article 19 clause 1 subclause C that basically talks about what? The freedom to form what? Association, union or cooperative societies. Now the basic meaning here is that it gives right to collective action and to organize groups. It includes political parties, trade unions, okay, NGOs, but the cooperative society, it was added later through the 97th Constitutional Amendment Act in 2011. Okay, now the article 19 clause 1 subclause D that talks about what? The freedom of what? Movement. The freedom of movement, meaning that you are free to move anywhere, travel across state, travel within the India. Okay, so the objective here is what? The objective here is the national integration, the unity of India, that you are allowed to move freely anywhere within the territory of India. The article 19(1)(e) 1 subclause E that talks about what? Freedom of residence and settlement. That means that it gives you right to live anywhere, right to settle anywhere and to establish residence. Okay, the article 19(1) subclause F that was basically repealed. It was repealed through the 44th Constitutional Amendment Act in 1978, and basically it gives the freedom of property. So it was being repealed. So now there is nothing. Now the article 19 clause 1 subclause F that basically talks about what? The freedom of what? The freedom of profession, occupation, trade or businesses. The freedom to earn a livelihood and to choose career, to conduct business and to engage in trade, to undertake occupations, to practice professions. For example, doctors, lawyers, teachers, engineers, shopkeeper, entrepreneurs, traders, industrialists. Okay, but these freedoms are not absolute. These are not absolute freedoms. There are certain reasonable restrictions. What? Reasonable restrictions. There are certain reasonable restrictions. So the reasonable restrictions under article 19 clause 2, there are some reasonable restrictions to what? To freedom of speech and expression. That is article 19 clause 1 subclause A. Okay, so these are exceptions to article 19 clause 1 subclause A that limits what? Freedom of speech and expression, and make these these rights non-absolute. Okay, so what are these reasonable restrictions under article 19 clause 2? The reasonable restrictions are sovereignty and integrity of India. Second is security of the state. Third is friendly relations with foreign states. Fourth is public order. Fifth is decency or morality. Sixth is contempt of court. Seventh is defamation. Eighth is incitement of offense. So basically, Article 19 Clause 2 restrict Article 19 Clause 1 subclause A, and the reasonable restrictions are what? There are 8 grounds. That is the sovereignty, integrity of the India, security of the state, friendly relation with the foreign nation, public order, decency, morality, contempt of court, defamation, incitement of offense. Okay. Now, but these restrictions must be what? Reasonable. And the conditions is that these restrictions should not be what? Arbitrary. They should not be in excessive. They should not be in discipline. And these are what? Subject to what? Judicial review. Okay. And now we will discuss the Article 19 Clause 3 puts reasonable restrictions over the freedom of assembly. It limits freedom of assembly. The freedom of assembly that is being given under Article 19 Clause 1 subclause B. So freedom of assembly basically guaranteed what? It guaranteed the right to assemble, to hold meetings, to conduct demonstrations and to peacefully protest. But there are some conditions, like the assembly must be peaceful, it should be without arms, and there should be no violence, no riot, no arms gathering. And there are some reasonable restrictions are being given under Article 19 Clause 3. Under Article 19 Clause 3, the reasonable restrictions are what? Sovereignty and integrity of nation and integrity of India. That is to what? That is to protect national unity and to preserve territorial integrity. The second one is what? The second reasonable restriction is public order. That is to maintain what? To maintain public peace, public safety, public tranquility, and prevention of disorder. The maintenance of what? The social harmony. But these restrictions must be reasonable, and these are subjected to what? These are subjected to judicially reviewed by the court. Okay, like suppose if a state impose some restrictions over your freedom of assembly, then the court will check whether it is constitutional or not, whether these restrictions which are being imposed are reasonable or not, whether they are being fair, whether are they being necessary, are these in proportionate, or whether they are being in public interest or not. If they are, then it will be a constitutional. If otherwise, they will be unconstitutional. Okay, now we will talk about what? Article 19 Clause 4. That basically puts some reasonable restrictions on what? The reasonable restrictions over the freedom of association, union, and cooperation. Reasonable restrictions over freedom of association and cooperative societies. That is under Article 19 Clause 4. It basically puts some restriction over the freedom of association, union, and cooperative society. Basically, these are being given under what? Under Article 19 Clause 1 subclause C. Okay. Now, these are the guaranteed right to form what? To form association, union, cooperative society, and to join associations and to continue membership, like for example the political parties, trade unions, student organization, and etc. But there are being some reasonable restrictions which are being put, and these reasonable restrictions are being put under Article 19 Clause 4. The reasonable restrictions are what? Sovereignty and integrity of India. The second reasonable restriction is public order. That is to maintain peace, public safety, prevention of disorder, and to maintain what? Social harmony. The third one is morality. Basically, it is to protect what? The social ethics, the public morals, and maintenance of what? The decent social standards. Okay, so these are the reasonable restrictions which are being put to freedom of association, union, and cooperative societies. Now let's see Article 19 Clause 5 basically puts some reasonable restrictions over what? Over freedom of movement. Put reasonable restrictions over freedom of movement and freedom of residence and settlement. So basically under Article 19 Clause 5 there are being some reasonable restrictions which are being put to freedom of movement. That is Article 19 Clause 1 subclause what? D, and under Article 19 subclause 1. Okay, so basically it balances individual liberty with social welfare, as Article 19(1)(d) that talks about the freedom of movement, that is to move freely throughout India, and the Article 19 clause 1 subclause E that talks about the freedom of residence and settlement, that to live anywhere and to settle anywhere in India. But there are some reasonable restrictions that are being put. The reasonable restrictions are what? And these reasonable restrictions must be what? Fair, just, necessary and non-arbitrary, and these are subjected to what? Judicial review. And the reasonable restrictions grounds are what? The ground one is what? The interest of the general public, that is the public welfare, public health, public safety, public convenience, public security. Okay, now the ground two, that is protection of interest of scheduled tribes, that is to protect tribal culture, tribal identity, and basically it preserve tribal land, prevent exploitation, protect traditional lifestyles. For example, there are some restricted entry into tribal areas, there are some inner line permit system, there are some restriction on land transfer, the scheduled area protection है ना. इनका ऑब्जेक्टिव क्या है? The objective here is to prevent cultural erosion, to preserve tribal autonomy. Okay, now we will see Article 19 Clause 6 that puts some reasonable restrictions over what? Over freedom of profession, occupation, trade and business. So these are guaranteed right under Article 19(1), that basically it gives you a guaranteed right to practice any profession, to carry on any occupation, to engage in any trade and to conduct business. Okay, but there are some reasonable restrictions, and these reasonable restrictions are being given under Article 19 Clause 6. So these reasonable restrictions are being given under Article 19 Clause 6. So basically there are three. First, there are some general restrictions, that is interest of general public. Okay, then there are some professional or टेक्निकल क्वालिफिकेशंस. अगर आपको डॉक्टर बनना है तो आपको MBBS MD ये सब करना पड़ेगा ना, ऐसे झोला छाप डॉक्टर थोड़ी नहीं बन जाओगे. एंड देन व्हाट? स्टेट मोनोपोली. Okay, so the interest of general public means that is to ensure what? Public welfare, health, safety, consumer protection, environment regulations, environment protection, fair competition, labor welfare, social justice. There are many. There are some examples. For example, let's see like the labor laws, the consumer protection rules, the drug regulations, है ना. Similarly, under Article 19 Clause 6 subclause 1, which basically puts some professional or technical qualifications. Why? The objective is to maintain some standard ना, and to ensure competency. अगर मान लो अगर आपको डॉक्टर बनना हो तो आपको मेडिकल डिग्री चाहिए होगी ना, आपको एडवोकेट बनना होगा तो लॉ डिग्री चाहिए होगी ना, और बार में एनरोलमेंट होना पड़ेगा ना आपको, बार काउंसिल. हाँ, चार्टर्ड अकाउंटेंट बनना है तो उसके लिए कोई क्वालिफिकेशन लगेगी. पायलट बनना है तो उसमें भी एविएशन का लाइसेंस चाहिए ना. तो इसका मतलब ये नहीं है कि अगर आपको फ्रीडम ऑफ प्रोफेशन दे दिया दैट्स मीन यू आर फ्री कि आप कोई भी प्रोफेशन प्रैक्टिस करना. भैया मुझे डॉक्टर बनना है, बन गए झोला उठाया, बन गए झोला छाप डॉक्टर. नहीं, आप नहीं कर सकते ऐसा. समझ रहे? सिमिलरली अंडर आर्टिकल 19 क्लॉज 6 सब क्लॉज 2 दैट बेसिकली सेट दैट स्टेट में कैरी ऑन व्हाट? ट्रेड, बिजनेस, इंडस्ट्री और सर्विसेज थ्रू गवर्नमेंट डिपार्टमेंट, PSUs, statutory corporations, state control corporation. State may exclude completely or partially, और citizen may be fully excluded, partially excluded और subject to license. तो यहाँ पे क्या है? स्टेट मोनोपोली है ना. स्टेट की मर्जी है यार कि स्टेट में कैरी ऑन एनी ट्रेड, बिजनेस, इंडस्ट्री और सर्विस. वो स्टेट को मोनोपोली दे रखी है. एटम बम बनाना है तो वो स्टेट की मोनोपोली होगी ना उस पर. ऐसा थोड़ी नहीं कोई भी उठ के पाव किलो के न्यूक्लियर बम बना के फेंक देगा कहीं पे भी. हर कोई पाकिस्तान थोड़ी है. जितनी टेक्नोलॉजी पाकिस्तान में बन गई इतनी टेक्नोलॉजी हर किसी के पास थोड़ी है कि पाव किलो के न्यूक्लियर बम्स फेंक देंगे वो, तो है ना. तो स्टेट मोनोपोली है. ओके, बट जो ये रीजनेबल रिस्ट्रिक्शंस है ना, ये यार फेयर होनी चाहिए, ये नेसेसरी होनी चाहिए, ये प्रोपोर्शनेट होनी चाहिए, और ये नॉन आर्बिट्री होनी चाहिए. समझ गए? ये ऐसे नहीं कि आप अनफेयर, अननेसेसरी, आर्बिट्री मैनर में कुछ भी रीजनेबल रिस्ट्रिक्शंस लगा देंगे. नहीं, ऐसा नहीं कर सकते आप, क्योंकि ये जुडिशली रिव्यू हो सकती हैं. ठीक है. नाउ आई थिंक वी हैव कवर्ड आर्टिकल 19 इन इट इंटायरिटी. अब अगर आप इसको पढ़ेंगे तो आपको समझ में आ जाएगा, है ना. तो थैंक यू फॉर वॉचिंग द वीडियो एंड प्लीज़ डू लाइक, कमेंट और शेयर इट अगर आपको ये हेल्पफुल लगी हो तो. ठीक है, और धन्यवाद आपका. बाय.